A floorboard groans in the darkness, a sound older than centuries. This is not merely a haunted house. This is the ancient Ram Inn, a strong contender for the most haunted building in all of England. Within its ancient walls, history and horror are inseparably woven into the very stones. By the end of this journey, you will understand why this unassuming inn holds such a terrifying crown, through a chilling blend of documented fact and first-hand nightmare. We will explore pagan pits beneath the floorboards and confront the spectral residents who refuse to leave. What does it truly mean for a place to be haunted? The village of Wotton-under-Edge is a postcard from another time. Nestled in the rolling hills of Gloucestershire within the famously picturesque Cotswolds, it is a place of honey-colored stone cottages, quiet lanes, and a profound sense of peaceful history. It is the last place you would expect to find a nexus of paranormal terror, and yet there it sits. The ancient Ram Inn does not belong to this idyllic scenery. It stands apart, a crooked silhouette against the gentle landscape. The building itself seems to slump under the weight of its centuries, its timber frame warped and twisted by time. It is a jumble of architectural whispers, with its oldest section dating back to the 1200s, a medieval core of rough-hewn beams and wattle and daub, later patched and expanded with stone and brick in a haphazard, almost desperate manner. This is not a preserved museum piece. It is a living, or perhaps more accurately, a dying artifact. Your first impression is not of quaint charm, but of a profound and unsettling presence. The roof sags, the windows peer out like dark, suspicious eyes. The very ground around it feels different, as if the earth itself remembers what happened here. You approach not a welcoming inn, but a relic that has witnessed too much, a silent keeper of secrets that have curdled into something far darker than mere history. Its story begins not with hauntings, but with hammers and chisels. The oldest timbers in the ancient Ram Inn have been dated to around the year 1145. To put that into perspective, this building is older than many of England's famous stone castles. It was already ancient when the Magna Carta was signed. Its original purpose was surprisingly mundane. It was constructed as a lodging house for the stonemasons and laborers building the magnificent St. Mary's Church, which still stands proudly on the hill overlooking the village. These workers needed a place to sleep and eat, and so this simple, sturdy structure was raised. But here is where the ordinary ends and the extraordinary begins. The land upon which it was built was not empty. Local law, passed down through countless generations, insists the inn sits directly upon a pagan burial ground, a site of ancient ritual and reverence. Furthermore, it is said to be positioned at a powerful intersection of ley lines, those hypothetical channels of earth energy that some believe connect ancient sacred sites across the landscape. Whether you believe in such energies or not, the intent of the builders is telling. Erecting a Christian church on a pagan holy site was a common practice, a symbolic act of conquest and conversion. But building the workers' lodgings directly on the burial ground itself, that feels less like symbolism and more like a profound oversight, or perhaps a deliberate provocation. From its very first foundation stone, the ancient Ram Inn was not built on neutral ground. It was constructed over a place of deep spiritual significance, a crossroads not just of footpaths but of worlds. This was the first layer of its curse, laid down centuries before the first ghost was ever reported. The stage for terror was set before the walls were even fully raised. For over 50 years, one name became synonymous with the ancient Ram Inn, John Humphreys. In 1968, this local builder and antique restorer purchased the property, not as a business venture but as a rescue mission. The inn was in a state of near collapse, condemned and scheduled for demolition. Humphreys saw not a ruin, but a priceless piece of history screaming to be saved. He moved in with his young family, intending to restore it to its former glory. What he got instead was an education in terror that would last a lifetime. From the very first night the phenomena began, disembodied footsteps paced the upper floors when the house was empty. Objects would vanish from one room only to reappear in another. Cold spots would form in the middle of summer, and an oppressive, watchful feeling became a constant companion. But John Humphreys was a practical man, not prone to fantasy. He began to document everything. He kept meticulous diaries, noting dates, times, and descriptions of each event. He invited paranormal investigators, journalists, and even skeptical academics to witness the activity for themselves. Over the decades, he transformed from a simple caretaker into the inn's chief archivist and its most passionate defender. He didn't just live with the ghosts, he learned their names and their stories, piecing together the building's grim tapestry from the fragments of history and the whispers in the dark. The inn became less a home and more a living museum, a carefully preserved time capsule of England's darkest folklore, with John Humphreys as its dedicated curator. His lifelong dedication ensured the building survived, but it came at a profound personal cost, a story of sacrifice we will soon explore. Today, the custodianship of the ancient Ram Inn has passed to his family, who continue his work with the same solemn duty. They maintain the building in its raw, unrestored state, preserving every creaking floorboard and shadowed corner exactly as John left it. They do not run a hotel. They oversee a preserved site of paranormal history, allowing investigators and the courageously curious to experience the unvarnished terror for themselves. The Mitchell family legacy is not one of exploitation but of guardianship. They stand as the keepers of the threshold, ensuring that the stories, the evidence, and the undeniable, chilling presence of the ancient Ram Inn are never forgotten and are always there, waiting in the darkness for the next visitor to cross its ancient doorstep. The heart of the inn's horror beats strongest in a room named for a ghost. They call it the Bishop's Room. To reach it, you must climb a narrow, twisting staircase that groans with every step, the wood worn smooth by centuries of passage. The door is low and heavy, forcing you to bow your head slightly as you enter, a gesture that feels unnervingly like submission. Inside, the air is still and cold, a chill that seems to seep from the stones themselves rather than the outside weather. The room is dominated by a massive, ornately carved four-poster bed, its dark wood seeming to absorb the scant light. The bed is ancient, its canopy a canopy of shadows. This is not a place of rest. It feels like a stage or perhaps an altar. The atmosphere is thick and oppressive, a physical weight on your chest that many visitors describe as the sensation of being watched by something deeply hostile. The entity said to reside here is the apparition of a malevolent bishop, a figure often seen as a dark, cowled shape near the bed or the fireplace. Those who have dared to spend the night report waking to the feeling of invisible hands tightening around their throat, a phantom strangulation that leaves them gasping for air. But the terror of this room is rooted deeper than its spectral occupant. Local legend and subsequent investigations suggest the Bishop's Room was constructed directly over a pagan burial pit, a sacred site desecrated by the building's foundation. It is as if the room itself is a lid placed over a well of ancient anger, and the bishop's ghost is merely the keeper, a Christian sentinel guarding a pagan tomb, his own spirit twisted by the dark energy of the ground beneath him. This is where history's layers collide most violently, where every creak of the floorboard might be an echo from a time long before bishops or bells, a whisper from the earth that never wanted a house built here at all. Yet the Bishop's Room is not the only chamber built over a wound in the earth. If you descend deeper into the inn's crooked heart, you will find a space that many investigators consider the true epicenter of its darkness, the High Priest's Room. The journey to this room feels less like walking and more like descending into a tomb. The air grows heavier, the silence more profound, as if the very sound is being swallowed by the stones. The lore surrounding this room is chillingly specific. It is said to be constructed directly atop an ancient stone circle, a pagan ritual site where, according to some accounts, sacrificial ceremonies once took place. This is not just a haunted bedroom, it is a room built upon an altar. The entity reported here is a stark contrast to the shadowy bishop. Visitors describe a tall, imposing figure, often perceived as a mass of pure darkness, a silhouette that seems to drink the light from the room. This is believed to be the spirit of a pagan high priest, a guardian eternally bound to the sacred ground his sanctuary has become. The physical effects felt in this room are intensely violent. People report sudden, plunging temperatures, a cold so deep it feels like it burns the skin. An overwhelming sense of dread and malevolence presses down, often accompanied by the sensation of invisible hands pushing, scratching, or even choking those who dare to enter. The attacks feel personal, a furious defense of a profaned holy place. These stories gained a terrifying layer of credibility during restoration work. When floorboards were lifted, workers allegedly discovered a cache of animal bones deliberately placed beneath the timber, a practice some associate with ancient foundation rituals or protective magic. Whether these bones were an offering to seal a pact, a warning, or a remnant of something far older, their presence lends a grim, archaeological truth to the whispers. The high priest's room is not simply haunted by a ghost, it is saturated with the resonant energy of a place that was never meant to be enclosed by walls, a site where the veil between our world and whatever lies beyond feels agonizingly thin. But the inn's darkness is not confined to its bedrooms and ritual sites. Step away from the private horrors of the bishop and the priest, and you enter the communal spaces where daily life once stubbornly persisted. Here, the hauntings take on a different character, reflecting not ancient ritual, but the raw human tragedies that soaked into the walls over centuries. The building's old stable, a space of worn stone and the lingering scent of hay and animal, is one such place. Visitors and investigators consistently report two distinct phenomena here. The first is auditory, the unmistakable sound of a horse shifting its weight, snorting, and stamping its hooves on the flagstone floor, a sound that comes from an empty corner where no animal has stood for hundreds of years. The second is visual, the apparition of a young woman, often described as pale and distressed, seen weeping near the stable door. Local legend ties her to a brutal murder, a story of a servant or stable hand killed in a fit of passion or rage, her life cut short in this place of labor. Her ghost does not attack or menace like the entities upstairs. She simply mourns, eternally replaying her final moments of sorrow in the place she died. It is a haunting of profound sadness, a human stain on the stone. Just a few steps away lies another workspace steeped in paranormal activity, the men's kitchen. This was the domain of the laborers, a room of hearth and hard bread where Roman soldiers are said to appear. Their apparitions, often seen as fleeting shadows or brief glimpses of armored figures, suggest the inn's land was a site of significance long before the current building existed, perhaps a Roman camp or waypoint. This pushes the location's active history back another 1,000 years, adding a classical layer to its medieval and pagan foundations. But the kitchen holds a more tangible and oddly chilling piece of folklore. During renovations, workers discovered a small, mummified cat sealed within the wall beside the fireplace. To modern eyes, this seems a grotesque find, but in its time, it was a deliberate act of protection. For centuries across Britain, it was common practice to conceal a dead cat, often a stray, within the walls or under the floor of a new building. This was not an act of cruelty, but a desperate form of spiritual security. It was believed the trapped spirit of the animal would act as a guardian, fiercely warding off evil spirits, witches, and malevolent magic from entering the home. The discovery of this desiccated guardian in the men's kitchen tells us two things. First, that the people who lived and worked here centuries ago already felt the location was spiritually vulnerable, requiring extreme measures to protect themselves. And second, that even their best efforts failed. The cat remains a silent, shriveled sentinel in the wall, while the ghosts of soldiers and murdered women walk freely through the rooms it was meant to guard. These communal hauntings reveal the inn not as a single haunted house, but as a palimpsest of human suffering and superstition, each era leaving its own distinctive scar upon the atmosphere. But these are not the only souls trapped within the Ram's ancient timbers. The building hosts a full cast of permanent residents, each with their own story, their own corner of the eternal night. Alongside the malevolent bishop and the furious high priest, other figures have been seen so often they have earned their own names. There is the Grey Lady, a woman often glimpsed in the upper corridors, dressed in the distinct, elegant garb of the Tudor period. She moves silently, a figure of profound sorrow, and is most frequently seen near what was once the inn's main sleeping quarters. Her story is lost to time, but her demeanor suggests a tragedy of love or loss, a guest or perhaps a lady of the house who never found peace. Then there is the heart-wrenching presence of a little girl. Her apparition is reported in several rooms, but most often in a small, tucked-away chamber. She is described as wearing simple, old-fashioned clothing, and her energy is one of palpable fear and confusion. The legend tied to her is as grim as it is straightforward. She is said to be the ghost of a young girl murdered within the inn centuries ago, her innocent spirit forever bound to the place of her violent end. Her appearances often precede feelings of sudden, inexplicable sadness or the sound of a child's faint weeping. Another frequent and deeply unsettling visitor is the apparition of a witch. This figure is not the stereotypical crone of fairy tales, but often perceived as a woman in dark, ragged clothing, sometimes seen in the gardens or near the old stable. Her connection to the site is speculative but potent. Given the inn's location on a pagan site and its long history, some believe she may have been a wise woman or healer who lived nearby, her spirit drawn back to the old energies of the land, or perhaps a victim of the local fear and superstition that claimed so many lives. In stark contrast to these tragic figures is a spirit of a notably different temperament, the ghost of a former innkeeper. This entity, often identified as a man named John or Jacob, is reported as being mischievous and playful rather than menacing. He is blamed for the classic poltergeist activity, the sudden slamming of doors, the moving of small objects, the faint sound of laughter in an empty room. It is as if he is still tending his domain, a forever host rearranging the furniture in his eternal tavern. This spectral cast, from the tragic to the troublesome, completes the picture of the ancient Ram Inn not as a house with one ghost, but as a spiritual tenement, a crowded afterlife where centuries of emotion, from violent death to simple daily routine, have left an indelible imprint. These are not vague presences, they are personalities, each a fragment of the inn's long, layered, and deeply troubled biography. The sheer volume of activity reported at the ancient Ram Inn is what transforms it from a spooky story into a documented case study of the paranormal. While the apparitions give the haunting a face, the constant, low-level phenomena are its relentless heartbeat. These are not rare, fleeting moments, they are the daily weather of the place, a storm of unseen energy that has been logged by hundreds of witnesses over more than half a century. Poltergeist activity is perhaps the most common complaint. Small, personal items vanish without a trace, only to reappear days later in plain sight on a table or bed. Heavy furniture has been heard scraping across floorboards in empty rooms. Doors, especially the ancient, heavy front door, slam with terrifying force with no draft or human hand to explain it. Disembodied voices are a frequent intrusion, ranging from faint, unintelligible whispers right beside your ear to clear, shouted commands that seem to come from the empty air of a corridor. These voices have been captured on audio recordings by countless investigators, providing some of the most chilling evidence that something intelligent shares the space. The physical sensations reported are even more disturbing, moving beyond sound and sight into the realm of tangible violation. Visitors consistently describe sudden, localized temperature drops, pockets of cold so intense they feel like walking into an invisible freezer. These are not gentle chills, they are violent plunges that raise goosebumps and make breath visible in the damp air. More alarming are the physical interactions. People report the unmistakable feeling of a hand brushing against their arm or back in a deserted room. Others have been pushed, some with enough force to stumble or lose their balance. The most terrifying and frequently reported assault is the sensation of invisible hands tightening around the throat. This phantom strangulation is not a mere feeling of pressure, but an active, tightening grip that leaves victims gasping and clawing at their own necks. An experience so visceral and terrifying it has driven grown adults to flee the building in the middle of the night. The auditory landscape of the inn is a cacophony from other times. Beyond the voices, the building is alive with echoes of its past. The sound of heavy, booted footsteps is heard constantly on the upper floors and in the attic, pacing with a slow, deliberate tread that follows you from room to room. In the stillness of the early hours, some have reported hearing the faint, rhythmic sound of chanting, a low, monotonous drone that seems to rise from the very foundations, possibly a ghostly resonance of the pagan rituals once performed there. This grim soundtrack is sometimes juxtaposed with the jarring, innocent sound of a child's laughter, echoing from empty rooms where no child could be. It is this relentless consistency that builds the case. When one person reports a door slamming, it is an anecdote. When 50 people, from skeptical journalists to hardened paranormal researchers, all report the same door slamming under the same circumstances over 50 years, it becomes data. The ancient Ram Inn does not offer a single ghostly encounter. It subjects visitors to a full-spectrum assault on the senses, a barrage of phenomena that suggests not a lingering memory, but an active, intelligent, and often hostile presence that is keenly aware of every living soul who crosses its threshold. Beyond the ghosts of bishops and weeping women lies a far more terrifying layer to the inn's story. This is the realm of the demonic, a claim that shifts the narrative from tragic hauntings to a battle for the soul of the building itself. The man at the center of these darkest allegations was its longtime owner, John Humphreys. In his later years, he spoke openly of encounters that went beyond mere apparitions. He described being physically attacked in his bed by an entity he called an incubus, a malevolent spirit of folklore said to assault sleepers. He recounted nights of being pinned down, unable to move or scream, while a crushing, invisible weight pressed upon his chest. But his most grave warnings concerned a specific entity he believed was not a human ghost at all, but a demonic presence that had taken root in the fabric of the inn. He claimed it resided in a particular room, radiating an aura of pure evil that no amount of prayer or blessing seemed to diminish. These were not the stories of a frightened man given to exaggeration. They were the solemn, documented testimonies of someone who had lived with the phenomena for decades, a man who had come to believe he was not just preserving history but containing a genuine evil. His convictions were so strong and the phenomena so relentless that they eventually compelled a drastic and formal response from the local church. The story of the attempted exorcism at the ancient Ram Inn is one of its most famous and chilling chapters. According to multiple accounts, a local vicar, accompanied by several bishops, arrived at the property to perform a rite of cleansing. They entered the inn armed with prayer and holy water, intending to drive out the dark forces within. But what happened next became the stuff of local legend. It is said that the ritual did not go as planned. Instead of subduing the entities, the ceremony seemed to enrage them. Paranormal activity reportedly escalated violently during the rite. The vicar leading the exorcism, a man of faith who had presumably faced spiritual challenges before, was utterly overwhelmed. The experience allegedly triggered a severe nervous breakdown, forcing him to abandon not only the exorcism but his parish duties for a significant time afterward. The church, it seems, retreated and the inn remained unconsecrated. This failed exorcism raises a profound and unsettling question for paranormal researchers and skeptics alike. What are we actually dealing with here? The debate often centers on two competing theories. On one side is the idea of a demonic infestation, an intelligent, malevolent, non-human entity that has claimed the location as its territory, one capable of manipulation and direct attack, as described by John Humphreys and seemingly evidenced by the exorcism's failure. On the other side is the theory of residual haunting energy, a psychic recording. This concept suggests the inn is a sponge soaked in centuries of trauma, fear, and dark ritual. The intense emotions of murder, sacrifice, and pagan ceremony have imprinted themselves on the environment, replaying like a broken record and affecting sensitive individuals. In this view, the incubus attack could be a psychic manifestation of that stored terror, and the exorcism failed because you cannot bless away an echo. You can only amplify the distress signal by disturbing it. The truth may lie in a terrifying synthesis of both, a place where a reservoir of ancient pain has attracted something that feeds upon it, a perfect storm of spiritual pathology that has made the ancient ram in not just a haunted house, but a place many believe to be genuinely cursed. The stones beneath the ancient ram inn hold more than just stories, they hold bones. During various renovations over the decades, workers made discoveries that moved the inn's legend from folklore into a more unsettling archaeological reality. The most disturbing of these finds were the skeletal remains of children, small bones carefully, almost ritually, placed beneath the floorboards and within the walls. These were not formal burials in a cemetery, but concealed interments within the structure itself. Alongside them, caches of animal bones, particularly those of cats, were uncovered in similar hidden locations. To the modern mind, this is a horrifying concept, but to the medieval builder, it was a grim form of spiritual insurance. The practice, known as a foundation sacrifice or immurement, was believed to consecrate a building and protect it from evil. The logic was tragically simple: a trapped spirit, whether human or animal, would become a permanent guardian, forever bound to ward off malevolent forces from the home. The discovery of these remains at the Ram Inn provides a chilling, physical corroboration of the dark rituals its builders felt were necessary to secure this specific plot of land. It tells us that even 800 years ago, the people who raised these walls sensed a profound spiritual vulnerability here, a need for extreme, sacrificial protection from the very first day. This tangible evidence creates a direct, unnerving link between the paranormal reports of childlike spirits and the physical history sealed within the mortar. But the significance of the location extends far beyond its foundations. To understand why this particular spot might accumulate such intense energy, we must look at the landscape itself. The inn is said to sit at a powerful confluence of ley lines. Imagine the English countryside not just as hills and fields, but as a vast, invisible web. Ley lines are theorized to be straight alignments connecting ancient sites of spiritual importance, like stone circles, burial mounds, old churches, and holy wells. Think of them as hypothetical channels of terrestrial energy, ancient pathways that our ancestors seem to intuitively recognize and mark. While the concept is debated by modern science, it remains a compelling part of esoteric geography. Maps of the area show a fascinating pattern. The ancient Ram Inn sits at a suspected intersection point, a node where multiple of these alignments may cross. More strikingly, it forms a direct line with the nearby St. Mary's Church, the very church its builders were constructing, and with other ancient sites in the region. This is not a coincidence. It reinforces the idea that this was a sacred location long before any Christian building stood here. The pagan burial ground, the potential stone circle beneath the high priest's room, and this ley line intersection all paint the same picture. This was a place of concentrated power, a spiritual hotspot. Building a church on such a site was a common practice of symbolic conquest. but building the workers' lodgings directly on the nodal point itself might have been like plugging a structure directly into a volatile energy source with no understanding of the spiritual circuitry. The inn, therefore, isn't just accidentally haunted. It was constructed on a geographical and spiritual crossroads, a place where the veil was already thin. The archaeological finds beneath the floor are the physical echoes of attempts to manage that power, while the ley lines represent the ancient, invisible currents that may have first drawn people to this spot, for ritual, for reverence, and ultimately for a haunting that has lasted a millennium. Such a concentrated well of paranormal activity was bound to attract those who seek to document it. The ancient Ram Inn's reputation exploded beyond local folklore, becoming a pilgrimage site for the world's most famous paranormal investigators. Perhaps no show did more to cement its terrifying fame in the public consciousness than Most Haunted. In the early 2000s, this hugely popular British television series dedicated an entire live special to the inn, broadcasting for hours into the night from its most haunted rooms. The team, led by skeptic-turned-believer Yvette Fielding, reported some of the most intense phenomena of their entire run. Crew members described being physically scratched, equipment malfunctioning without cause, and a palpable sense of dread that reduced seasoned investigators to tears. The broadcast was not without controversy, as some critics questioned editing choices, but for millions of viewers, it was a raw, visceral introduction to the inn's power. It transformed the Ram from an obscure local curiosity into a national icon of fear, a place where professional ghost hunters with all their technology seemed genuinely overwhelmed. This media spotlight opened the floodgates. The inn became a staple of paranormal television, featured in countless documentaries and series from around the globe, including shows from the United States and Japan. Each production brought its own cameras and microphones, and each seemed to capture something new. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, recordings from the site are particularly chilling. In these audio clips captured in silent rooms, voices seem to speak from the static. Investigators have recorded clear, intelligent responses to questions, including threats, pleas, and historical references that align with the inn's lore. One frequently cited EVP, captured in the bishop's room, is a deep, guttural voice that seems to say, "Get out," moments before a door slammed violently on its own. Beyond audio, visual anomalies are regularly reported on film, from unexplained orbs of light streaking through the darkness to fleeting, shadowy figures caught in the corner of the frame, figures that were not seen by the naked eye at the time of filming. The inn's legend has also been solidified in print. It is the subject of chapters in dozens of books on the paranormal and has been profiled in major newspapers and magazines, often with headlines questioning its status as England's most haunted house. These articles rarely just recount the stories. They often highlight the first-hand accounts of journalists who spent a night there and emerged shaken, adding a layer of credible, contemporary testimony to the centuries-old tales. This constant cycle of investigation and media coverage has created a feedback loop. Each new documentary or book attracts more visitors, and some of those visitors then have their own experiences, which in turn become new data points, new stories that fuel the next article or television special. The ancient Ram Inn is no longer just a building, it is a living archive, and its pages are being written by every voice recorder left running in the dark, every night vision camera pointed into an empty corner, and every terrified witness who runs from its door before dawn. The evidence, while debated, has woven the inn inextricably into the fabric of popular culture, a benchmark against which all other haunted locations are measured. But what does it feel like to stand in those rooms? The true power of the ancient Ram Inn is not found in history books or television shows, but in the trembling voices of those who have survived a night within its walls. These are not legends, they are lived experiences, recounted by ordinary people who walked in as tourists and emerged as witnesses. One woman, who asked to remain anonymous, described her visit to the bishop's room. She said the air grew thick the moment she stepped inside, a cold so deep it felt like needles on her skin. As she stood by the ancient bed, she felt a distinct, icy pressure wrap around her wrist as if a hand had seized her. She pulled away, seeing nothing, but the sensation of 5 cold fingers lingered for hours. Another visitor, a self-proclaimed skeptic, recounted his attempt to sleep in the men's kitchen. Just as he began to drift off, he was jolted awake by the overwhelming smell of rotting meat and damp earth, a stench so foul it made him gag. In the pitch black, he then heard the clear, rhythmic sound of heavy breathing right next to his ear, a sound that followed him as he frantically gathered his things and fled to his car before sunrise. These are the moments that transform abstract fear into visceral reality, a touch in the dark, a smell from nowhere, a breath where there is no body. Paranormal investigators, those who seek out such phenomena with meters and recorders, often report that the ram-in seems to actively resist their scrutiny. A seasoned investigator from a well-known team described setting up a bank of fully charged batteries for their night vision cameras. Within an hour, every single battery, despite being new and of different brands, was completely drained to zero, a statistical impossibility under normal circumstances. Another recounted the constant failure of their digital voice recorders in the high priest's room, the devices either shutting off spontaneously or filling with a blaring, metallic screech that erased any potential evidence. But the technical malfunctions are often secondary to the personal toll. Many investigators speak of a building intelligence that toys with them. One leader of a research group shared that during a vigil, they asked aloud for a sign of presence. Immediately, a heavy candlestick flew off the fireplace mantel in the bishop's room, sailing across the space to land at their feet. Yet when they reviewed their static camera trained on that mantel, the object was seen to simply vanish from its place and reappear on the floor, with no visible trajectory in between, defying physics and deepening the mystery. The most common thread in every testimony, from the first-time visitor to the hardened investigator, is not a specific ghost sighting but an overwhelming emotional assault. People consistently describe a wave of primal dread that washes over them upon entering, a feeling of being unwelcome, hunted, and profoundly unsafe. This is not simple fear of the dark, it is a psychological weight, a sense of malevolent observation that presses down from the crooked beams and leers from the shadowed corners. A medium who visited the property broke down in tears before even entering the building, overwhelmed by what she described as a cacophony of sorrow and anger emanating from the stones. She refused to go inside, stating the energy was too hostile and tangled to confront. These personal stories form the human evidence, the raw data of terror that no meter can measure but no witness can deny. They tell us that the haunting of the ancient ram-in is not a passive recording, but an interactive and often aggressively personal experience. When so many unrelated people across decades report the same specific sensations of being touched, choked, watched, and driven out, it builds a case that is far harder to dismiss than any fleeting shadow on a camera. The house does not just have a history, it has a personality, and that personality is deeply, unsettlingly opposed to the living. Among the many relics preserved at the inn, one stands apart for its stark physical horror. It is the mummified cat discovered sealed inside the wall of the men's kitchen during renovations. This is not a random skeleton, but a deliberate placement, a creature that was almost certainly alive when it was immured centuries ago. Its body is now a desiccated twist of fur and bone, curled in a permanent, agonized crouch within a glass display case. To look at it is to feel a deep, instinctive chill. This artifact is a direct, tangible link to the desperate superstitions of the past, a practice known as concealing a witch's familiar. In folk magic, a familiar was a spirit that aided a witch, often taking the form of an animal like a cat. By walling a living cat inside a new building, people believed they were trapping a protective spirit. The cat's suffering and death would bind its soul to the location, creating a permanent, ferocious guardian that would scare away evil spirits, dark magic, and misfortune. It was a brutal contract, a life sacrificed to secure the safety of the household. The discovery of this grim guardian in the men's kitchen speaks volumes. It tells us the original builders or later inhabitants of the Ram Inn felt an extraordinary need for such protection. They weren't just putting up a charm for good luck, they were performing a severe ritual to fortify a site they already perceived as spiritually vulnerable. The eerie feeling it evokes today isn't just about its appearance, it's the unsettling knowledge of its purpose. This small, silent form was someone's answer to the darkness they felt here, a failed attempt to build a spiritual wall against forces that clearly proved stronger. Its continued presence, now behind glass, serves as a haunting monument to that failure, a reminder that even the most extreme measures of the past could not cleanse the deep stain on this land. The very architecture of the ancient Ram Inn seems designed to unsettle. Its physical form is a maze of oddities where every crooked angle and hidden recess feels less like poor craftsmanship and more like a deliberate shroud for secrets. The doorways, for instance, are punishingly low, forcing even an average person to stoop in a gesture of humility or caution upon entry. This isn't merely a feature of medieval building standards, it is a persistent theme that creates a constant physical reminder of submission within your own space. The floors slope and buckle unpredictably, and the walls lean inward as if the house is collapsing in on itself, a sensation that produces a genuine physiological disorientation. You cannot walk a straight line or trust your own balance, which subtly primes the mind for unease, making the supernatural feel that much closer. But the true mysteries are the ones you cannot see at all. Within the thick stone and wattle walls, there are whispers of hidden spaces. Investigators and historians have long suspected the presence of priest holes, those secret chambers built into the fabric of homes during the English Reformation to hide Catholic priests from Protestant authorities. The inn's age and location make it a prime candidate for such a desperate, clandestine history. A hidden compartment or a false wall here would not have been for treasure, but for preserving a life, a place where a man might hold his breath in silence while soldiers' boots thundered on the floorboards just inches away. The psychological residue of that kind of terror, the sustained, claustrophobic fear of discovery and martyrdom, could seep into a building's atmosphere as deeply as any pagan ritual. These architectural anomalies do more than just look strange. They tell a story of a building that has always been a place of concealment and fear. The uneven floor might mask a hidden cavity below. The strangely thick interior wall might contain a forgotten passage. This physical environment of secrets validates the emotional experience, making the feeling of being watched not just a ghost story, but a plausible reaction to a structure literally built for hiding things and perhaps for hiding from something. When every corner could conceal a historical truth or a trapped spirit, the line between paranoia and perception begins to blur completely. The village of Wotton-under-Edge does not merely host the ancient Ram Inn, it breathes its own stories into the surrounding hills. To understand the full gravity of the inn's haunting, you must listen to the whispers of the land itself, a tapestry of local folklore that predates the building by centuries. The Cotswolds have long been a landscape steeped in magic and mystery, with tales of witchcraft woven into the history of its villages. During the fever pitch of the witch trials, this region was no stranger to fear and accusation. Local records speak of cunning folk, wise women who knew the secrets of herbs and healing, and of the darker suspicions that followed them. Stories persist of secret covens meeting in forest clearings or within the hollows of ancient gnarled trees, practicing rites that blended old pagan beliefs with a desperate grasp for power or protection. This cultural backdrop means the Ram Inn was not an isolated anomaly of fear, but a product of its environment. When villagers spoke of a malevolent presence at the inn, they were doing so within a living tradition that already acknowledged the unseen world as a tangible and often threatening force just beyond the firelight. One of the most pervasive and chilling pieces of regional folklore is the legend of the phantom black dog. Across the British Isles, tales of these spectral hounds, often known as Black Shuck or simply the Barghest, speak of a monstrous canine with eyes like burning coals. They are omens of death, said to haunt lonely lanes, ancient trackways, and places of execution. The Cotswolds have their own versions of this myth. There are accounts from travelers over the centuries who reported encountering a huge, silent black dog on the old roads leading into Wotton-under-Edge, a creature that would appear beside them one moment and vanish into the mist the next. These stories are not mere campfire tales. They are deeply rooted in the psychic geography of the area, often tied to old ley lines or burial grounds. It is fascinating, then, to note that some visitors to the ancient Ram Inn have reported seeing a large, shadowy dog-like shape within the building itself, particularly near the old stable or in the garden. This suggests the inn may not just be haunted by its own history, but is acting as a beacon or a crossroads for the older, wilder spirits of the landscape, drawing in the regional folklore and giving it a home. Beyond specific apparitions, the everyday superstitions of the region fed the inn's growing legend. The discovery of the mummified cat in the wall was not an isolated oddity, but a reflection of common practice. People here once nailed horseshoes over doors with the open end up to catch good luck, and they would never bring hawthorn blossoms inside, fearing it would invite death. The very act of building a home involved rituals to appease the spirits of the land. When such a building, constructed with all these desperate protections, still became a byword for terror, it amplified the fear exponentially. The villagers' tales did not create the phenomena at the Ram Inn, but they provided a language for it, a framework of belief that allowed every strange sound or cold draft to be interpreted not as a quirk of an old building, but as evidence of a deeper, darker truth. The inn sat at the center of this web, a physical anchor for all the amorphous fears of the countryside. A child's nightmare about a witch could be whispered about in the same breath as a sighting of the bishop's ghost. A farmer's story of a phantom dog on the ridge could blend seamlessly with a traveler's account of being choked in the bishop's room. The village folklore and the inn's documented horrors validated each other in a continuous loop, each lending credibility to the other, creating a perfect storm where legend and experience became indistinguishable. This cultural context makes the haunting of the ancient Ram Inn somehow more profound. It is not an imported ghost story, but one that grew organically from the very soil and stone of the Cotswolds. The land was already speaking in a language of omens and spirits. The inn simply gave that language a loud, clear, and terrifying voice. It became the central character in the region's dark fairy tale, the place where all the whispered warnings of your grandparents turned out to be terrifyingly, undeniably real. This intertwining of place and story raises a compelling possibility that some locations are not just haunted by events, but are inherently receptive to them, acting as amplifiers for the fears and beliefs of every generation that lives in their shadow. The Ram Inn, built on its pagan crossroads, may be the ultimate example, a lightning rod for centuries of supernatural dread. Yet for all its terrifying lore, a crucial question remains. Could there be simpler, earthly explanations for the horrors of the ancient Ram Inn? Skepticism is not just healthy, it is essential when confronting such extraordinary claims. The power of suggestion here is immense. You arrive at a building proclaimed for decades as England's most haunted house. You have read the stories, seen the television specials, and your heart is already pounding before you step through the crooked doorway. In such a heightened state, your mind is primed to interpret every ordinary creak as a footstep, every shadow as a figure. This psychological priming, known as the ideomotor effect, can make people unconsciously move objects or interpret vague sensations as paranormal contact, especially in the suggestive atmosphere of a guided vigil. Then there is the building itself, a physical environment almost designed to unnerve. Environmental factors play a significant role. Old structures like the Ram Inn are full of hidden sounds. Settling timbers groan under their own weight as temperatures change, creating those distinct footsteps in empty rooms. Centuries-old floorboards shift and pop, mimicking the sound of knocks or distant voices. Drafts whistle through countless unseen cracks in the wattle and daub, creating sudden, localized cold spots that feel like a spectral presence passing by. Perhaps most intriguing is the potential role of infrasound. These are sound waves with a frequency lower than 20 Hz below the range of human hearing. We cannot consciously hear infrasound, but our bodies can feel it. Studies have shown that exposure to certain low-frequency vibrations can induce feelings of profound dread, anxiety, and even the sensation of being watched. It can cause visual disturbances, making you see movement in your peripheral vision, and create a feeling of pressure on the chest. Large, old buildings with specific architectural proportions can naturally generate infrasound from wind passing over roof lines or through cavities. The ancient Ram Inn, with its sagging roof and labyrinthine interior, could be a perfect infrasound generator, bathing its occupants in an unseen frequency that directly triggers primal fear. These rational explanations are powerful. They account for the goosebumps, the chills, the unexplained noises, and the overwhelming sense of dread that so many visitors report. They remind us that our perception is fragile and that a place can feel haunted without hosting a single ghost. But do they explain everything? Can infrasound account for the detailed, intelligent responses captured on voice recorders? Can a draft physically push a person or make a candlestick vanish from a mantle and reappear on the floor? Does the power of suggestion explain the shared, simultaneous experiences of multiple seasoned investigators, all witnessing the same apparition at the same moment? For many who have stood in the bishop's room, the purely environmental argument begins to fray at the edges. It feels like trying to explain a forest fire by pointing to a single match. The rational theories provide a compelling framework for the atmosphere, but they often stumble over the specificity of the encounters, the personalized interactions, and the sheer volume of corroborated detail that has accumulated over half a century. The truth of the ancient Ram Inn may not be a choice between science and the supernatural, but a terrifying intersection where both are true, where the natural unease of a dying building provides the perfect stage for something else, something older and far less understandable to perform. John Humphreys did not just live in the ancient Ram Inn, he waged a 50-year war within its walls. The psychological toll of that battle is etched into the stories of his life there. He was a builder, a man of practical hands and sturdy resolve, yet he famously took to sleeping with a medieval sword by his bedside. This was not a theatrical prop, but a desperate, physical totem of defense against the invisible assaults he endured night after night. Imagine the sheer weight of that reality, lying in the dark of a silent house, your hand resting on cold steel, not because of a threat from the outside world, but because of the certainty of an attack from the darkness of your own bedroom. That constant state of hypervigilance, of waiting for the next footstep, the next cold hand, the next crushing weight on your chest, is a form of sustained psychological trauma. Over years and decades, that environment doesn't just scare you, it reshapes you. Your perception of reality becomes fluid. Every shadow holds intention, every sound is a message, and the line between a waking nightmare and daily life dissolves completely. The stress of such an existence can manifest in very real ways: anxiety, sleep deprivation, and a heightened sensitivity that might make one more receptive to subtle environmental cues that others would miss. It creates a feedback loop where fear sharpens your senses, and your sharpened senses then detect more things to fear. For someone like Humphreys living in that crucible, the haunting became less a series of events and more the very atmosphere he breathed. This raises a profound psychological concept that might explain some of the inn's power, the idea of place memory, sometimes called psychometry. This is the theory that intense human emotion, particularly trauma, can somehow imprint itself onto the physical environment like a psychic recording on a loop. A location becomes a storage device for anguish, terror, or despair. Sensitive individuals or those under prolonged stress might then unconsciously tune into these recordings, experiencing echoes of the past as if they were happening in the present. They might feel a sudden, inexplicable sadness in a room where someone died grieving, or a bolt of panic in a spot where violence occurred. At the ancient Ram Inn, the potential imprints are countless: a pagan priest's final ritual, a child's murder, a bishop's dark rites, the terror of a hidden priest. If place memory is real, then the inn isn't just haunted by ghosts. It is saturated with the emotional residue of 1,000 terrible moments, a psychic soup that visitors stir with their own presence. John Humphreys, spending a lifetime there, may have become a permanent receiver for that signal, his own mind amplifying the whispers of the stones until they became screams in the dark. His sword was a defense against entities, but perhaps the greater battle was for his own sanity, against the relentless, echoing memory of the place itself, a memory that felt less like history and more like a living, breathing enemy in his home. England is dotted with places that claim a ghostly heritage, from the bloody Tower of London with its headless queens to the infamous Borley Rectory, once branded the most haunted house in the country. Yet the ancient Ram Inn stands apart in this spectral league. The tower's hauntings are tied to specific, documented historical figures and events, a parade of royal tragedy. Borley Rectory, for all its fame, was a relatively modern building from the 1860s, and its phenomena, while compelling, were often centered on a single nun and poltergeist activity. The Ram Inn's claim is built on a far deeper, more layered foundation. Its age is its first distinction, with a core that predates both those locations by over 700 years. This is not a house that became haunted. It is a structure raised upon ground already considered sacred and perilous. Its origins are not royal or religious in a conventional sense, but pagan, tapping into a primal, pre-Christian wellspring of energy that feels far older and less defined than the ghost of a beheaded monarch. Where other sites might have one or two signature ghosts, the Ram Inn hosts a cacophony of them, a crowded afterlife of bishops, priests, weeping women, mischievous innkeepers, and frightened children, each representing a different century of sorrow and violence. But perhaps the most compelling argument for its unique status is the sheer physicality of the attacks. While many hauntings involve sightings or sounds, the Ram is notorious for direct, visceral assault. The feeling of hands around the throat, the violent pushes, the scratches that appear on skin. This combination of extreme antiquity, a foundation in ancient ritual, a menagerie of entities, and a propensity for physical interaction creates a perfect storm of paranormal intensity. It transforms the experience from observing a haunting to becoming a participant in one, often against your will. This is why, when the debate for England's most haunted house arises, the ancient Ram Inn is never far from the center. It offers not just a ghost story, but a sustained, multi-sensory siege, a quality that makes its reputation not merely historical, but terrifyingly immediate for anyone who dares to cross its threshold. This profound and terrifying legacy has transformed the inn into a modern pilgrimage site. The ancient Ram Inn today is a unique and carefully preserved institution. It is not a pub nor a hotel in any conventional sense. It is a private home, a living museum of the paranormal, and a meticulously maintained historical artifact. The family who now cares for it opens its doors to the public through pre-booked tours, overnight ghost hunts, and special events, allowing the curious and the courageous to step directly into its storied darkness. This practice sits at the heart of what we call dark tourism, the travel to sites associated with death, tragedy, and the macabre. The ethics of this fascination are complex. On one hand, it could be seen as exploitative, turning real suffering and historical trauma into a spectacle for thrill seekers. Yet on the other, there is a deep, almost primal human drive to confront the unknown, to test our own courage against the stories that frighten us. Visiting a place like the Ram Inn is not merely about being scared. It is about seeking a tangible connection to history's shadow side, to validate the whispers of the past with our own senses. It is an attempt to answer that most haunting question for ourselves: what is real? For those whose answer is a desire to visit, the experience is intentionally raw. There are no luxury amenities here, no cozy beds or warm welcomes. You are entering a preserved time capsule of fear. Practicalities are part of the challenge. The building has no central heating, so the cold is both natural and supernatural. The floors are uneven, the lighting is minimal, and the atmosphere is one of undisturbed antiquity. Overnight investigations often involve long vigils in the pitch-black rooms, with only your own flashlight and the equipment you bring. The rules are strict, respecting the building's fragility and its spectral residents. You must come prepared for discomfort, for the psychological weight of the environment, and for the very real possibility that you will experience something you cannot explain. This is not an attraction designed for passive entertainment. It is an invitation to become an active participant in an ongoing investigation, to add your own story, whether of unease or profound encounter, to the centuries-old ledger of the ancient Ram Inn. The journey does not end when you leave. It lingers in the silence of your own home, in the memory of a touch in the dark, and in the newfound knowledge that some doors once opened can never truly be closed. The debate over what haunts the ancient Ram Inn ultimately leads us to a single, electrifying frontier. This is the space where ghost stories meet gadgetry, where fear is filtered through frequencies and measured in milligauss. Modern paranormal investigation presents itself as a scientific endeavor, an attempt to apply empirical tools to the most elusive of subjects. Teams arrive at locations like the Ram Inn armed not with holy water, but with an array of electronic devices, each designed to detect anomalies in our physical environment. An EMF meter, or electromagnetic field meter, is perhaps the most iconic tool. In its legitimate use, it detects fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, which can be caused by wiring, appliances, or geological factors. Paranormal investigators operate on a theory that spiritual entities might manifest by drawing on or disrupting this ambient energy, causing the meter's lights to flash or its needle to spike in areas with no apparent source. Thermal imaging cameras are another staple, scanning a room for sudden, unexplained cold spots or, more rarely, heat signatures that correspond with no visible body. The hope is to capture the chill of a presence or the fading warmth of a form just passed. Then there are the digital voice recorders, run for hours in silent rooms to capture electronic voice phenomena, those cryptic whispers and replies that seem to emerge from the white noise long after the investigators have left. The argument from those who use this equipment is compelling. They are not relying on fleeting feelings, they are gathering data. They document baseline readings upon entry, note every spike and drop, and cross-reference audio and visual evidence from multiple devices. At a place like the Ram Inn, the results are often prolific. EMF meters will go haywire in the bishop's room with all power cut. Thermal cameras show distinct, human-shaped cold spots moving through an empty corridor. Digital recorders capture clear, intelligent responses to questions asked hours before. For the investigators, this isn't proof of ghosts in the traditional sense, but evidence of an unknown energy, a form of consciousness or residual intelligence that can interact with our electromagnetic environment. They see themselves as pioneers on the edge of a new science, collecting the raw data of the afterlife. The mainstream scientific community, however, remains largely and understandably skeptical. Their critique is methodological. Science relies on reproducibility, controlled conditions, and the ruling out of all natural explanations before proposing a supernatural one. A haunted house investigation is the antithesis of a controlled lab. The environment is filled with unaccounted variables, from underground water creating damp and cold spots to old wiring emitting erratic EMF fields. The power of suggestion and auditory pareidolia, where our brains impose familiar patterns like words onto random noise, is a powerful confounder. A scientist would argue that an EMF spike in an ancient building proves only that there is erratic electromagnetism present, not its cause. A thermal anomaly proves a temperature differential, not a ghost. An EVP is an interesting audio artifact, but without a controlled source, it cannot be verified as an external intelligence. The gap between these two worlds is vast. One side sees a body of compelling, repeatable anomalies that point to a new frontier of understanding. The other sees a collection of interesting anecdotes contaminated by poor controls and human psychology. Yet, in the darkened rooms of the ancient Ram Inn, this theoretical debate collapses into immediate sensory experience. When an EMF meter spikes violently at the exact moment, three people independently feel a hand on their shoulder. The line between data and dread vanishes. The tools may not provide scientific proof, but for those holding them in that moment, they become translators, giving a digital voice to the ancient, silent terror in the stones. Its terrifying reputation has bled beyond the realm of ghost hunters and into the very fabric of our culture. The ancient Ram Inn has become more than a building. It is a modern archetype, a living set piece that has inspired a spectrum of creative works. Novelists and screenwriters searching for the quintessential haunted house need look no further than its crooked silhouette. Its story offers a perfect, ready-made blueprint of Gothic horror tropes, each one echoing from its stones. There is the ancient, decaying house itself, a character of malevolent sentience with its groaning timbers and oppressive atmosphere. Within its walls lies the classic buried secret, not just a skeleton in a closet, but a pagan burial ground and the bones of sacrifices beneath the floor. The malevolent clergy is personified in the spectral bishop, a corrupted figure of supposed faith who now embodies terror. These are not invented plot points, they are reported realities, making the Inn a unique crossover where documented paranormal case study meets timeless horror narrative. This fusion has proven irresistible to storytellers. While no major Hollywood film has directly named the Ram Inn, its DNA is visible in countless haunted house stories that feature a location built on unhallowed ground, where the haunting is tied to a specific, violent history rather than a random ghost. It serves as a foundational reference, a real-world anchor that makes even the most outlandish fictional hauntings feel eerily plausible. The Inn's influence is perhaps most potent in literature, particularly within the thriving genre of British folk horror and supernatural fiction. Authors drawn to authentic, soil-deep terror often cite locations like the Ram as direct inspiration for their settings, capturing that specific dread of a landscape older than memory, where ancient rites have poisoned the well of history. Visual artists, too, have been captivated. Painters and illustrators have rendered its warped facade under brooding skies, emphasizing its isolation and architectural unease. Photographers, both professional and amateur, attempt to capture its essence, often finding that the most compelling images are not of ghosts, but of the emptiness, the way light falls across a dusty floorboard in the bishop's room, or the stark shadow thrown by the mummified cat in its case. These creative interpretations form a feedback loop. Each novel that uses a ram-like setting reinforces the archetype in the public mind. Each painting that captures its grim majesty deepens its iconic status. This transforms the Inn from a local curiosity into a shared cultural touchstone, a shorthand for ultimate historical haunting. Why does this particular location hold such power for the imagination? Because it feels authentically old in a way that a modern haunted house attraction never can. Its horror is not manufactured, it is accumulated, layer upon layer, century upon century. It embodies the slow, chilling dread of history's weight, the idea that some places are not just witnesses to evil, but active participants, forever stained by the actions of the past. In a world of fleeting trends, the ancient ram inn endures as a permanent fixture in our collective nightmare, a reminder that the most terrifying stories are the ones we suspect might actually be true. But beneath the layers of evidence and legend, the ancient ram inn fiercely protects its core truths. For every story told, a deeper mystery remains stubbornly locked within its crooked walls. Who was the little girl whose spirit is said to weep in the upper rooms? Her story is a ghost without a history. No name, no date, no record of a child's murder in the local archives corresponds definitively to the haunting. She is a presence built entirely from emotion and testimony, a fragment of sorrow with no beginning. This absence is itself a kind of haunting, a lost life screaming to be remembered for nothing but her fear. Then there are the pagan rituals. We speak of sacrifices and stone circles, but what was truly done on that ground? The discovery of bones tells us something happened, but the specific ceremonies, the deities invoked, the reasons for choosing this exact spot are lost to the unrecorded centuries. Were they rites of fertility, of burial, or of something far darker, a desperate attempt to commune with forces that should have been left alone? The violence of the phenomena forces another unsettling question. Why is the activity here so physically aggressive? Most hauntings are passive, echoes and apparitions. The ram inn attacks, it pushes, it scratches, it chokes. This suggests either an intelligence brimming with malice or a reservoir of trauma so potent it can physically manifest its anguish. Which leads to the greatest puzzle of all. Are these entities conscious, or are they recordings? Is the bishop's ghost a sentient being aware of your presence, choosing to threaten you? Or is he merely a flickering loop of energy, a psychic stain replaying its final, furious moments on a permanent, terrifying repeat? The evidence tantalizingly points in both directions. The personalized responses on voice recorders suggest awareness, while the repetitive nature of some phenomena feels like a broken record. Perhaps the inn holds both, a chaotic blend of residual energy and intelligent presences drawn to the power of the place, all trapped in a tangled, eternal dance. These are the questions that no investigation has fully answered, the secrets the stones refuse to surrender. They are what transform the inn from a solved case into a living mystery, inviting every visitor to listen in the darkness and form their own terrifying conclusion. So the question becomes intensely personal. Could you stay the night? Picture yourself alone after the last tour group has left and the heavy front door swings shut with a final echoing thud. The modern world falls away, replaced by a silence so deep it seems to hum with anticipation. You are left with only your flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive dark of the ancient ram inn. Every sound is magnified 100-fold. That groan from the ceiling is not just an old timber settling, it is a footstep directly above you in the empty attic. The soft rustle in the corner is not a mouse, but the whisper of a skirt brushing against stone. Your own heartbeat becomes a drum in your ears, a frantic rhythm against the slow, patient silence of the house. You decide to brave the bishop's room, climbing that narrow staircase that feels like ascending into a throat. The air grows colder with each step. You push open the low door and step inside, the beam of your light dancing over the carved posts of the ancient bed. And then you feel it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. It is not a vague unease, but a focused, intelligent pressure, as if something is standing inches from your face in the absolute blackness just beyond your light. Your skin prickles, the cold becomes a physical weight on your shoulders. What do? Do you stand your ground, whispering a question into the void, or does a primal instinct scream at you to run, to escape that crushing, invisible gaze? Later, you muster the courage to descend to the high priest's room. The descent feels like walking into a well. The atmosphere here is different, not a watchful intelligence, but a roiling, ancient anger. The air feels thick, resistant, as if the space itself resents your living presence. A sudden, plunging cold wraps around your ankles like a vise. A wave of nausea and dread hits you so forcefully you stumble back against the wall. In that moment, a sound reaches you, a low, rhythmic chanting that seems to vibrate up through the soles of your feet from the stones below. Is it your imagination, a trick of the wind in the foundations, or are you hearing the ghost of the ritual that poisoned this ground 1,000 years ago? The theories and stories vanish, replaced by raw animal fear. If a door slammed shut by itself, trapping you in that room, would your rational mind hold firm? If you felt an icy hand close around your wrist in the dark, would you dismiss it as a draft? This is the ultimate challenge, the in-presence, a confrontation not with history, but with your own perception of reality. It asks you to decide where your line is, the moment when a fascinating ghost story becomes a personal, undeniable encounter. The true haunting of the ancient Ram Inn may not be in proving the ghosts exist, but in discovering what you truly believe when you are left alone in the dark with them. That final, solitary moment in the darkness is the true legacy of the ancient Ram Inn. We have walked its 900-year journey from pagan crossroads to a modern byword for terror. The evidence is not a single ghost story, but a mountain of converging threads. The architecture itself is a maze of submission and hidden spaces, a physical cage for unease. The archaeology provides grim, tangible proof with bones beneath the floorboards, sacrifices made to protect a site already feared. And towering above it all are the countless testimonies, the documented voices of those touched, pushed, and spoken to by the dark. This convergence is what sets the inn apart. It is not one man's nightmare, but a chorus of fear sung across centuries, a place where history's shadow has taken a permanent, hostile residence. So where does that leave us? Perhaps the most profound truth about the ancient Ram Inn is that it defies a neat explanation. It stands as a monument to the possibility that some places on this earth are simply wrong. They are wounds in reality, saturated with a past so violent and sorrowful that it bleeds into the present. We can measure its electromagnetic fields and analyze its floorboards, but we may never truly understand the nature of the thing that waits within. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed, and some stories are not meant to have an ending, only an enduring, chilling question mark. If you found this journey into the unknown compelling, share your thoughts in the comments below. What would terrify you most about a night within those walls? For more explorations into history's darkest corners, be sure to subscribe. The past has many secrets, and some of them are still very much alive.